Hi guys, and here's another tutorial for Blender, and we're going to be texturing this. So at the end of the previous tutorial, we added this glow effect underneath of the floor. So what we're going to do now is add some walls, and we're going to be focusing on UV unwrapping and texturing of this. So we'll jump back over to my 3D view. So this is basically what we had by the end of the previous tutorial. I've turned off the array, but that's basically what we had. I'm just going to delete this plane because we don't need it. Alright, and so I'm going to add in a new plane. So we'll go to object mode, create a plane. We're going to rotate this 90 degrees in the x-axis. Okay. We'll move it up here. Right, now we'll jump over into our edit mode. Tools, loop cut. We're going to remove these two vertices. XV. Loop cut again here. And we're going to remove these two vertices also. Now we'll add a mirror modifier, so add modifier, mirror. We're going to add it in two axes, X and Y. Back into our edit mode. I'm going to drag this up. So we want to get this to be sitting on our floor. So we want to get the right height for our wall. Probably want it to be a bit higher than that. Okay, that maybe is a little bit too high now. Let's play around to get the height about right. Okay, that's probably about good. Alright, so back over here into edit mode. Make that narrower. I'm going to loop cut here. I'm going to grab these two edges and we'll move those back. So there is our basic wall shape there. Now we'll extrude this out. So we'll extrude it. Actually, we'll go backwards, so we're extruding the y-axis. We'll extrude again, this time in the x-axis. Just a little bit. Extrude again. Whoops. Extrude again Y. Extrude again X. There. Something like that. Maybe we'll add one more layer to it. So let's extrude X. Maybe we'll make this one a little bit bigger. Extrude Y. And finally extrude X out to the width of our wall. Okay. I'm happy with that. Right, so now I'll jump back over into object mode. I'm going to position this over our floor. Front view. And the right view. Hold on, I'm just going to go back down here. Edit mode, I'm going to grab that edge, make our floor area here just a little bit wider. And drag this back. That's about right. Back into edit mode. And we'll make this the same size as our floor. Okay. Good with that. And then we're also going to add an array modifier to this as well. and the array modifier will be -1. I think we had 9 on our floor, so we want 9 also on here. So we'll jump back over to our floor, turn this on. 9, yeah. That should now all line up nicely. Okay, so there is our wall. So anyway, I'm not going to go too much into the details of modeling because this isn't really supposed to be a modeling tutorial. So there's our corridor wall there. We're going to mirror this. So we'll add a mirror modifier. To here we already have one, so we'll add in the Z. Go into edit mode, select all, we'll drag that back, and that will adjust our corridor width. Get it where we want it. Edit mode. Oh yeah, we just need to adjust this one also. We'll grab that edge. Okay, it's probably about good. So there's our floor and our walls. So if you view this from our camera angle, there, we're looking down this corridor. Okay, so what I want to do then basically is we're going to add some UV unwrapping to this wall in order for us to add some texture to it. We're also going to add it to the floor as well. So oops, I'm going to view, we drag in a new view panel here, and we'll make this a UV or image editor. And what we want to do is create a new image. I'll go to open image, and I'm going to grab one of my textures. So basically, if you go on Google and you search around, you'll be able to find free textures. So there's these metal textures, or you can go over to my blog and you can also get this exact texture that I'm using from there. So where are we? Textures and metal textures. I think it's base 122L. I think this is the one. Yeah. So here is the metal texture that we're going to be using. So this is going to be the texture which is going to make our wall. So let's grab our wall. We'll jump over into edit mode. We select all. We hit U for unwrap, and there. And that will unwrap our wall and place it onto here. Now you can see it's a little bit crooked, but we can straighten all that up after. Before we actually use this, hold on, let's just create a new image, and this one's going to contain a UV grid. So we'll call this one UV grid. Oops, put grid. UV grid. Okay, so we're going to use the UV grid as a test to see how everything lines up on our actual object. So we're in cycles render here. We come over to our right hand panel here, and we'll open up our texturing options here. We'll create a new under diffuse diffuse BSDF. Under here we want to choose a image texture, and for the image texture we'll select our UV grid, assign that to our object, and we'll come over into texture. Okay, so now we can see our UV grid here. Now what we can do is basically look and see any areas which look stretched or that are not lining up properly. So you can see we've got a funny thing going on here. and that's to do with our objects here not really being aligned up. Now I'm going to turn on synchronized editing, so whatever I select in here will then become selected in our main view. So synchronized editing is this here. So if we select this panel, face mode, so that's this panel here, and you can see it's at an angle, which is why we have a funny angle here. So when we actually come to do our texture, things are going to look a little bit odd where it joins up here. So we want all this to be straightened up. So that's pretty easy to do. We'll just come down here in our UV image editor, and we just want to kind of line up all these things. So if we come into vertex selection mode, so we'll grab this, and this vertex. The way we do this is we scale it on an axis. So we press S, and I think we're on the x-axis, SX0, and that will straighten those up. And then we'll do the same with these. SX0. You'll see now that straightened up our UV mapping there. So we'll just basically go through and do this for all of them. So SX0. Let's get all of our axes, vertices nice and straight. And then we'll also do the same across the top in a moment. So just go along SX0. And it's worth the time doing this. UV unwrapping can sometimes be a little bit of a tedious process, but it's worth putting the time and effort in to really get the kind of finished result that we desire, and it will look much better. So now we want SY0, correct? SY0, there we go. And here also. So you can imagine if you have a very complex shape, this whole process can become even more complicated. We've got a pretty basic shape here, so it's not so bad. Okay, so now we've done that, you can see that our texture is now, this is perfectly unwrapped and perfectly matching our shape here. Really, the squares all line up absolutely perfectly. So that means now we are ready to, let's change the image. Back to our base metal. So now we have that. We can change our material here. Base metal also, and there we have our base metal material nicely unwrapped and placed on our wall. It looks pretty much perfect. However, there's a few things that we can do to actually improve the look and feel of this texture. So now we're going to go into those. So what I do want to do is I want to change my light back to blue, back to white. I don't really want it this blue color, so I'm going to shift this back to white. Okay, happy with that. Increase the strength a little bit. Maybe I'll decrease the strength a little bit, actually, because we're going to put some additional lights in. Okay, so there's our white light, we have our dark steel on the floor, and we have our grey structure. Over here, we're going to change this to our metal texture. Okay. Now I'm going to open up my nodal editor. So node editor here. And we're just going to improve this texture a little bit. So what I'm going to do is, to make our rendering a little bit faster, I'm going to turn off our modifiers for now, because we don't need to see that part, and we'll hide this. Okay, so yeah, I just want to be working basically on this section here, so we can see the texture result. So I'm going to throw in just quickly a light, so that we have some light on this scene. So come to create, plane. Let's rotate this. Y-axis, and we'll apply the light material to it, our white light. Okay, so now we have something to cast some light on there. So I'm going to switch over into rendered mode. There's our texture, but we were going to improve this by adding in some nodes here. So we've got a very basic, oops, select the right one. We've got a very basic metal texture here. I want to add some roughness to this, and also some reflections. So we're going to add in a node, and we'll add a shader, glossy shader, and we connect this to our color there. And then we need to add in a mix shader, which is going to mix those. We'll come out to our surface there. Okay, so we've got our image texture, we've got a diffuse color, we have a glossy texture, we have our mix shader, which is mixing all of this together and outputting it as our final material output at the end there. So you can see here in our preview now, we've got some glossiness to this. So we can change the amount of glossiness by adjusting the roughness of our texture, or by adjusting this. So we don't want it to be too glossy, but we want it to be, you know, just a little bit shiny to catch some light. So by adjusting this here, we can change the amount of roughness and glossiness that we have. So you play around with those until you get something that looks about right. It's probably enough reflection. Okay, now I'm going to add in also a mix RGB. Change that to multiply. Plug this into the color 2. Whoops. Alpha. There we go. We make the color bright white. And the output of this, I think we plug into, I think it's volume, if I remember rightly. And then by altering the amount of this, we can change how much texture we actually have. So it's like adding a bump map almost. So it'll actually give more texture to the surface. If we zoom in a little bit so we can get closer to this. Right, it should be displacement that it goes to. Displacement, I think. That was correct. So you don't want this value to be very high, because otherwise you'll end up with too much texture. You know, if I make this very high here, you see how we get too much of this texture? We just want this effect to be, you know, a little bit subtle, so turn that down. Maybe 0.13 is enough. Okay, I'm happy with that. Right, so we're done basically now with our shaders here. So we can close our node editor off. And apply these effects again. Turn all our objects back on. Okay, and then we'll go to View, Active Camera. You see now we've got these reflections coming off of our walls there. I'm just going to move the camera around. Get a view that I like. Okay, that's good. Okay, and now all we need to do is add in ceiling to this, and also as well we might add some texture to our floor. So we're going to do the same UV unwrapping process for the floor. So we'll go back to our perspective view. The floor is going to be really easy to unwrap. So again, we go to our base metal material, move into edit mode, select all. Now, we've got our grid there, which is also going to be unwrapped with this, but we can ignore it. You have a smart UV project. Okay, so all these lines here we can kind of ignore because that's just the grid. So in our gray structure here, I'm going to change our surface, glossy, diffuse. Change to an image texture. Go ahead and grab the UV grid again. Everything, that all already lines up. You can see here already anyway, it's square, so we don't need to do any of the lining up. But it's just a good practice to check. So that's all good. So we'll change our image texture to our metal base also. You can see here maybe it's a little bit large. So what I'm actually going to do is, let's make sure we've got our... Yeah, okay. So we'll select faces. Select all these faces here. Oops. And I'm going to scale it up a little bit. Yeah, up. Move that. Okay. Now you can see now we've got this like floor panel type effect going on. So I'm happy with that. Okay, so I can close this off. We'll go back to our camera view. So there we go. Now we're just going to add the roof and a light. So very basic modeling again. Not going to spend too much time on it. 3D view, orthographic view there. So for the roof, we just create another plane. Oops. Created that in edit mode, which we shouldn't have done. Back into object mode. Okay, create the plane in object mode. Drag that up. Just going to turn off our modifiers again so we can get the sizing correct. View top. So again, we're going to edit mode. Sorry, edit mode, and grab our tool here, loop cut. Oops. Zoom in a bit closer, make it easier. Loop cut. Third time lucky. Okay, vertexes. Remove these. Loop cut again. And we'll remove those two vertices as well. Alrighty. Grab the edge. We're going to add modifiers to this, so we'll add our mirror modifier. X and Y, turn clipping on. Just join up our vertices there, maybe we're a little bit off. Okay, we're good there. Just going to line this up over the top of everything. We'll turn on our mirror modifier there. Back into edit mode. Grab our edge. Drag it out. Move everything down. Shall do that in object mode, so we stay around our center. So we move our origin as well. Okay, that's good. Excellent. Back into edit mode. Add in a couple of loop cuts. Grab this face. Oops. Another loop cut. So we grab this face. Move it up. We're going to have some lights. We're going to have a lights placed inside there. And another loop cut. We'll just add some shape to this. Just give it some interest. Okay, that's good enough. Don't spend too much time modeling this. Like I said, it isn't really a modeling tutorial. We're focusing more on the texturing and lighting. But obviously you need a model first for you to texture in lights. And we'll grab this, we'll extrude it upwards. That's going to be the recess where our lights will be, I think. Alright. Good with that. Okay, back into object mode. We'll drag that down. Bring our edges across. Alright. Now here in edit mode, we're going to select the faces that we want to be our lights. So that's going to be here. And I think this also. Those are going to be our lights. So we'll come over into our texture and add a new, and that's going to be our white light. Assign. Oops. Invert our selection. Add a new material. That will be our structure gray, I think. So we'll have our gray structure material on the roof, and let's see how that looks. Okay. So there's our basic lighting for our scene. Let's jump over to our camera view. Good with that. Alright, so we'll come out of edit mode. We're almost there now on the home straight. Just like this. Turn on our modifiers again. Select our floor. Turn on the modifier, and we know we need to add, finally, an array modifier to this. -1. I think we had 9. That's about right. Okay. So there is our very, very basic model here, but you know, you could go in and add much more detail to this. But what we're focusing mainly on here, though, is just the lighting and the texturing. So there you have it. That's basically how we can add some textures and some lights to our model. I'm going to do a final rendered output, and I'll show you that in a moment. Obviously, we've got nothing at the end of our corridor here, so it's a little bit plain, but there you go. So I hope this was of some use to you. A good, very basic introduction to UV unwrapping and adding materials, and how to set those up using the cycles render. So the only thing that remains to be done is to do a final render. So just make sure that your sampling is set to a higher number. By default it's 10, so I usually set it to around 500 to give us a good quality output. And I'll just pause this video while the rendering is done. And 8 minutes to render, but there's the final output. The rendering is a little bit longer when you start adding in these textures and whatnot, but as you can see, it actually forms quite a realistic looking effect, and we haven't really put a huge amount of effort into this. I could have aligned up the camera a little bit better, obviously, but yeah, so that's basically how you UV unwrap and apply a texture. Check it using the UV grid square, and then we put our glow lights up here. It's lighting the scene quite naturally, and I think it all looks pretty neat, really, considering that this is probably less than an hour's work for everything. If you include the previous tutorial. So yeah, if you like this, then please head over to my blog. You can actually download the project file from there. You can use it yourself, and you can play around with it. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the like button. Helps me out a lot. Thanks very much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.